Well, hello and welcome to the GMODISM channel with your host Eric. We are back here for our little tutorial on making the hoplite have some good stuff. And today we're going through active defenses. So this is a detailed walkthrough type tutorial where we'll fix a variety of active defenses for the hoplite hull. This is sort of a tutorial-ish series, so if you want to know how to set up the armor on a hull, this hull in specific, and if you want how to set up the propulsion, well, then I have to refer you to the previous two tutorials. This time, we have by YouTube vote decided to go through active defenses. So active defenses is basically different types of defenses that are not passive defenses. Armor is an example of passive defense. Active defenses can be stuff like interceptors to shoot down incoming missiles. We have stuff like maneuverability, like evasive maneuvers. We have jammers, we have decoys, we have actually a lot of things. So, without further ado, let us upgrade the hoplite a little bit. We need to get some armor on this thing. And I'm gonna write a list real quick together with stuff we're gonna go through in this video. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is the updated hoplite hull. And I also have the list of stuff we will add here. So, just to go down a little bit quickly here, what we're going to go through in this tutorial. We have active defenses, basically how to not die fast. So first off is detection and munition warners. We need both detection underwater and overwater in order to detect incoming projectiles. Like we can have a passive radar, we will detect radar guided missiles, for example. With just visual cameras and stuff, we will detect stuff incoming to us as well. But there is a specific little block which is called munition warner, and a munition warner is great for detecting stuff, and that's a specialized detection equipment which you find under defense. So here you will have the munition warner, and it basically is a type of camera. It is automatically connected to all of your AIs you have on your craft, so even if you have 5 AIs, all of them will be automatically connected to the munition warners. Before you needed to connect them with wireless receivers, now you don't have to do that anymore. Anyways, we're going to set up a good amount of those for redundancy, but do keep in mind that munition warners are a little bit better at detecting things. So for example, super fast missiles and APS shells, your cameras and stuff will have a hard time detecting them, so you kind of need munition warners if you want to use LAMs. And yeah, we're gonna build a LAMs system, so that is a little laser system that can shoot down incoming projectiles, and they are best to shoot down APS shells with, because APS shells are so fast, it's impossible to shoot them down actually with CRAM cannons and all that stuff. Like close-in weapon systems, pronounced CRAM, I know. So CRAM will be able to shoot down CRAM shells. They will also be able to shoot down missiles, but they will not be able to shoot down APS shells. So our CRAM cannon will be an APS itself, by the way, but you can make CRAM with plasma. You can actually make a laser turrets that's CRAM, but generally for that, LAMs is just better. LAMs is a specific node which you get from the laser, so we're gonna set up a LAM system to target incoming APS shells. Yeah, then we want the general CRAM cannon. That's gonna double as DPS, that stands for damage per second. We are going to use a MDB cannon, DIF-CIWS. It's gonna be, well, before it was called flak, but that's like yeah, that's some German word for yeah, whatever. I can't pronounce that. They renamed it to MDB, Munition Defense Bodies, which is what the shell is gonna be. So it's gonna be a diff gun. It's gonna fire telephone poles of, well, as people say, flak against incoming CRAMs and larger missiles. And basically insta-kill them in one shot. The downside is that the DIF gun has maximum 5 shots per gun, so it's kind of a early defense, but it won't hold up forever. Then we're going to look at interceptors, and not the aircraft designation, but the missiles, the interceptor missile. So the interceptor missile and interceptor against torpedo or torpedo interceptors is a specific type of missile that can shoot down incoming CRAMs and missiles. And we're gonna set them up in a very specific way, so they actually have a chance at hitting incoming CRAM shells, which is pretty hard. But if you know the right settings, you can do it. And I'm gonna show you the right settings in this video. Then we're going to have smoke and lasers, laser warners. So basically, if you don't have smoke on your craft, you will be absolutely fried by lasers. So yeah, that we need. That's an active type of defense. Then we need to have shields. And shields are pretty expensive to run on both sides always. So we're gonna set up a smart side switch, so that our shields basically turn off if the enemy is on the right, respectively left side. So we only use, we can thus have more powerful shields than we otherwise could. And then we're going to look at missile decoys and powered decoys. So that are 2 types of decoys that can trick enemy aiming systems and missiles. We're going to look at ECM jamming, basically jamming your enemy's detection equipment that will weaken the radar-guided missiles. That will weaken their remote-guided missiles. And of course, radar-guided missiles is confused a lot by chaff emitters. Also, ECM jammer helps a little bit at targeting enemy missile signal processors, so they will be more easily confused, if I remember correctly. Then we're going to look a little bit at evasive maneuvers, which is not very relevant for a ship, but I'm actually going to show you a ship that uses evasive maneuvers. We're not going to set up evasive maneuvers for this ship, but I'm going to give you some general recommendations on that. So, without further ado, let's take a little look at the hoplite upgrade. So I preloaded in some shells here, which we're going to look at for the CIWS cannons. I added more engine power. So here we have some engine exhausts. We do have a more effective engine there. We have some added material storage. We have a ammo box here because, of course, our weapons, our active defense weapons, will require some of the ammunitions. Yeah. This is a little detection turret I added there. We are going to add more detection, but just as a little baseline, this is a tiny turret which is set up on a spin block. If you want to go have a full walkthrough of my tiny detection turrets and how to make them, I have a video about that on the GMODISM channel. Because, yeah, some people don't like to use detection on turrets, some like to use it fixed. We're gonna have both, but this is an example of a detection turret. Right, so this is the location where we are going to have our general CIWS cannon. So this is just a little turret well, which is armored and ready for a gun to be put in. Very simple, 3x3. You can just stick a turret in there of the same size. And I just measured it out here. So we need to build a turret that is exactly 10 blocks high before it goes up to make it fit there. So that's what we're going to make. To make all of this work, we are also going to have an AI core. So, this is not the AI tutorial. We might go in AI settings and all that jazz in a later video. But as of right now, I just spawned a simple little AI here, which we're going to use it just provides a general AI. It will target things that are basically larger and closer. It's pretty basic like that. And we have a wireless transmitter on channel 1. We have set it up to some basic routines. And again, this is not really relevant for this video in particular. We are not going through AI behavior in particular here. No, we are actually just going through how to set up active defenses. But to do that, we need an AI. So I just wanted to say that as a little footnote, that I'm going to put my AI in here, so you'll know what we have added to make stuff work. Because if you don't have an AI, the active defenses we're gonna make in this video just won't work. So yeah, let's begin with setting up a little bit of detection. So here we do have our hull, and we need to add some detection on it. Again, this is a little detection turret, but now we don't have a superstructure or anything ready yet, but we do completely lack detection underwater, for example. So this is something we'll need to set up. So as you can read here, the sonar can detect incoming torpedoes and underwater mines with a range factor of 25%. So it's good to have a sonar. Now, if sonar is a relevant detection thing for you, like for example, a sonar 90 has a chance of detecting underwater mines and torpedoes by a range factor of 50%, so that's much better actually. So you'll have to decide, will sonar be an important detection like metric for your vehicle, or will it suffice with a 360 sonar? You can use both as well. Here we also have the passive sonar. The passive sonar is also something that can detect active sonar. So basically torpedoes with active sonar seeking, or other ships with sonar as well. But for this case, what we think about mostly is the detection of torpedo with sonars. Yeah. So passive sonar is great for that, since you can see also that they have a range factor of 50% here. When we're setting up detection, we need to make sure there is nothing blocking them in their path. So for example, this is probably the path they need to be. Okay. So we can have a sonar, let's say here. We're gonna place a sonar. And what we basically can do here, you can decide if you want it to be EMP insulated or not. If it's EMP insulated, it will survive EMP blasts, but it will make the armor a little bit less good. But in general, this is a good idea to have. So I'm gonna make it EMP insulated by removing blocks around it and just placing rubber around it. So there, 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 and there. Then we go to the AI. We have the wireless receiver, and we can tilt it like this so we can see it there. And then we can go to our detection equipment, and we have the passive sonar right there, and we can put a sonar 360 on top of it, just like this. And we have a little backup sonar system down here to detect incoming torpedoes. Since the game has indeed buffed torpedoes a little bit so that their speed is not affected anymore if they are being damaged, but they are still continuing with their same speed, that means torpedoes are a lot more scary than before. So I want to have active detection on the side as well. So inside of here, I want to have, well, EMP not insulated, but as a backup, I want to have a 90-degree sonar on both the left and right side of the vehicle. So we have some pretty decent and redundant detection here. Yes, indeed. So roll back to 0. Thank you very much. And now we can look a little bit at our detection. Here we basically have a visual camera tracker, a visual camera, and a laser rangefinder, which is nice. Now we don't have the superstructure ready really, so we're just gonna add a little temporary detection equipment thing here, which we're going to move later on. But just so you understand what we're looking for here, we need some specific types of detection. So we already have visual, great, but incoming radar guided missiles, for example, requires us to have a passive radar 360, and we can complement this with a radar 360 as well to help us to help us detect incoming stuff. So yeah, that is just some basic detection we have here for that. So of course now we also need to have munition warners. It's also really good to have munition warners on the on different sub objects, but it's also good to have a backup setup on your ship parts. So for example, we can add one here on the side, each side of the ship like this. Basically, you only need one in each direction, and then you are fully covered. But of course, things get damaged, things get shot off, and then you basically lose that direction. So it can be good to have some backups in your most important detections. Right, so for forwards, it's gonna be a little bit difficult to find an aesthetic place to have them. Then there is always a little hack you can do with the decoys to just stick them on top of the hull and then like add a nice little rod or something like this to make them look like they're meant to be there. Very nice. And don't forget to have a munition warner that can detect things that come from above. It's namely so that mortars, for example, but also top attack Lua missiles, if somebody codes missiles to really come from straight above you, or bombs, it's good to have a munition warner basically pointed upwards as well. And when we have a superstructure on this vehicle, we should add some extra for redundancy, but it's good to have at least one in each direction on the hull as well. And remember, the munition warners do not work underwater, so don't place any of them under your water line, because yeah, they don't work underwater. That's why you need the sonar to detect things that come from underneath water. All right, so that means the first section we can basically cross this off. Detection and munition warner is made. Now we're gonna make a LAMS system, which is set up specifically for APS shells. By the way, if you want this notepad, I recently uploaded it to Steam Workshop if you want to download that. Or if you're a commissioned officer, you already have access to it, of course. But in any case, when it comes to LAMS, they are also under the laser system, and this is the easiest thing to set up. You don't even need to have much complex things at all to set up LAMS. You basically only need a laser system, LAMS nodes, and detection to make them work. Now you have to make a decision. LAMS nodes, they are EMP susceptible, which means they can be killed by EMP. So either you'll have to EMP secure them by basically surrounding each of the connection points to the LAMS nodes with rubber, or you'll have to have some extras so you can afford a couple of them without disabling your entire LAMS systems. And I'm gonna go for the later route. I'm going to have LAMS nodes in the left and right directions, and I'm going to have 3 points, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 9 in total on each sides. And you know, that adds up, it's 100 materials per LAMS nodes, but basically, if you don't have any LAMS nodes left, the entire laser system you build for this will be useless. So yeah, we are going to set up some LAMS nodes here. So basically you need to you need a way to connect them up to. And also you can see I have some surge protectors nearby so that they will be shot down instead. All right. So here we have 3 like this. They are hanging in the air right now. So within here you need laser connectors and then some way to connect them up. So we're gonna have here in the middle, we're gonna remove a block there. And again, need to fill up these. And here, so we are connected up. Beautiful. So there we have 9 of them on each side. And this little section needs to be checked off, so we're just going to fill in the missing blocks so we don't compromise our armor too much here. So laser transceivers is a weird ass wireless system of basically connecting up laser damage. So yeah, it's really weird, but it works. So we're just gonna add some laser transceivers here and here, which makes us connect them up to a little spinal point. And where these meet, we need to have a connector with other transceivers. So you can see here we got that. So we need one there. That is on target there, because they need to be connected up just in line. And they will be able to output a beam to connect each other up. So it's basically a little connection network. And these should connect to each other as well. And well, these sections are not EMP susceptible, by the way, which can be good to know. As for now, we're just going to have some basic, well, networks here. We're going to have some scaffolding truss to basically make them have something to stand on. It's not gonna be the final thing that holds them up, but just for now, to make stuff works. Right, so everything we connect up to this little network of beams, we can input to the LAMS nodes. And we're going to build a charge laser system. So we're gonna use more laser storage cavities. And that's basically because if we have laser storage cavities, they are a little bit cheaper, and we can basically load in stored laser power, and then we can use it whenever we are being hit by scary APS shells. So that's kind of the little trick, because if we use a very strong pump laser, we are basically going to use a lot of engine power all the time to keep it up. And if you have that engine power to spare, well, do have a really strong pump laser. But if you don't have that much energy, or not energy, engine power to spare, it's a really good idea to have some extra laser storage on there, so you basically can charge up the LAMS when you're not being fired at. So you can basically, if your enemy shoots you with a really scary shell every 10 seconds, it's actually more efficient if it takes exactly 10 seconds for your laser to load up full capacity. Yeah, and by the way, now we have LAMS connections to the left and right of the ship. But if you have LAMS as the de facto or only active defense system on your ship, and you intend to make it pretty big and expensive, then it can actually be a good idea to, just like the munition warner, have LAMS nodes in basically any direction, like all of the different direction, except underwater, because underwater LAMS are really ineffective, so that's not the best way to use them. Now, if you know a lot about lasers, you know that basically the only EMP susceptible laser components are the LAMS node and the laser pump. The rest are not EMP susceptible, and it can be a good idea to protect your laser pumps, since, you know, if you lose them to EMP, your lamps are useless. And you have a couple of these as backup, you know, LAMS nodes. But if you lose your pumps, you will not be able to charge up the LAMS anyways. But the rest of the laser components are absolutely fine. So we're going to build our LAMS system here. So now you can see I added a multi-purpose laser. You don't need to name them LAMS, but I do. So here you can see as soon as I spawned this multi-purpose laser to this, the entire network lights up, and that means it's working. If you have a connection that's not lined up or not working, that probably means they are misaligned. So here we have a multi-purpose laser, and we have some stuff we can use on that. It doesn't really require a lot of setup, but it's good to have an output regulator. You don't need to change anything here, but it can be a good idea to set, like, because we don't really set this to 1%. We don't want it to wait before firing the lamps or stuff like that. Or actually, it doesn't really matter. But energy discharge rate, 10% per second is the max, and we want to use max capacity if we can when we need lamps. Right, you can make pulse lasers or you can make continuous lasers. For LAMS in particular, it's really the only option to use continuous laser. And I'm gonna tell you why that is. That is because continuous laser have a higher armor class than pulse lasers. And you don't need a high armor class in order to deal damage against shells. But when you have smoke protection on your own ship, like we will have later, you will have to set up your lamps to fire through smoke, because you just have to do that. And then if you have a AP class of the laser that's really close to the AP of what you're shooting at, and you are shooting through your own smoke, it will be really weak. But when you have a 0Q laser or continuous laser, you basically bypass that and have a stronger AP value by default, which will make your lasers more powerful firing through smoke. So the potential advantages from a pulse laser or a pulse LAMS laser, it's not worth it, is what I'm trying to say. Use Q0 laser, or, argue with me in the comments if you don't agree. But if you know that much, maybe, I don't know why you would watch this video anyways. But if you have any questions or am wondering why that is or want some closer explanations, you can just ask me in the comments. But what you need to know right now is we're going to make a Q0 laser, and if you made a pulse laser, it's going to be worse. Anyways. Now we're going to set up some laser couplers with pumps. They don't need to be over here because, of course, we want them to be a little bit EMP secure. So yeah, we're going to set them up in a somewhat secure position, but still at a location that they are really easy to connect up. So we're going to have them just below here. That's going to be the simplest way to connecting them up. Because these laser connection network, EMP can't travel through those, so it will be EMP secure if we have it down here. So we're just going to have a little rubber base here, where we're going to have this little node, or not node. Now I'm confusing you with the wrong words. I, of course, mean this little battery of lasers. Anyways, as said, we want a charge laser system, and we want it to not be directly connected up. We want them to be wirelessly connected up like that. So we can just have 1 meter of free air, or more if we want to have armor. That is up to you. But yeah, I'm gonna have it like that, and a laser coupler here. And to make a 0Q laser, you see this has 0 Q switches. We don't need to add any Q switches, so just do not add Q switches. Then we can use this extra little space to basically have a frequency doubler on each side here. This will make the intensity of the laser higher, which will make it a little bit better at firing through our own smoke. Then we basically just need to take these guys And well, we can remove one of them. Excuse me, now I have them the wrong direction. The suction cup needs to be pointing towards the laser coupler. Just like that, very nice. And we're gonna do the same on this side. Then we're gonna add pumps. So I'm gonna add the pumps probably at the base here. And then we need a frequency doubler, like, no, I'm sorry. Then we need a cavity. A simple cavity. I'm gonna place it there. Simple cavity, we're gonna place it here. Then we're gonna connect up things to this. Excellent. And we can then basically see how much power are we gonna use now. So we go to our multi-purpose laser and we can see the power needed right now is 360. Okay, we can actually use some more power for our laser. So I think perhaps we can have a LAMS system that uses like this and like this. And we need to attach some more. And that's basically the LAMS we're gonna use. I'm just gonna copy over this little section and paste it in here. Now we have a somewhat stronger laser. It will now use 1440 power continuously when in use, and that's okay. And you can see it really takes a long time for it to load up, so it slowly loads up, and this will mean that the LAMS will be able to really kill very scary shells that hit us in its early blasts. And then of course, that's very important, taking out damage early combat, and then basically having an upkeep of a decently strong laser to survive smaller damage. But we really have the capacity now to counter a first initial very scary blast, which is super important. In any case, if you feel like you want to have more continuous laser support so that your LAMS will be stronger, just on the go, regular, and you're okay to pay more engine power with that, well, basically replace some of the laser cavities with laser pumps until you have the balance you want. Now, the only thing that remains is actually setting up the LAM nodes. So here you can see here, engage projectiles above water only. I really recommend you to have any altitude, because if you select only over water, it will basically means that if an APS shot is fired either underwater or it is fired to hit your ship underwater, so it basically dips down a bit, your LAM nodes might not target it. And that will be really detrimental, because that's of course a strategy, firing APS shells under the waterline at you, basically bypassing some LAMs. And since you're only shooting very, if you're only shooting very, like from here to a projectile that would hit here, you're not going to pass through a lot of water. I think the LAM node says somewhere that it deals very little damage underwater. I don't know exactly where it says that. Let's see. Yeah, well, whatever. You do want to use it at things underwater, but of course it's really good to have decent torpedo protection from other ways, which I'm going to show you later. If you want to do this, but because otherwise, you know, the LAMs will be exhausted on the torpedoes and may not be able to do too much damage to them. But in any case, here we have target projectiles. So we're gonna set it to target all projectiles. You can set up LAMs to only target missiles or only shells, for example, if you want to not waste any LAMs damage. But I'm gonna set them to target all projectiles. Now this is important, check fire within smoke. That is good to have. Minimum diameter to engage. So for example, if you get shot by some type of sandblaster, it can be good to set it to not target things that are under 100 millimeter, because then you might exhaust the LAMs on a sandblaster, and that's just not worth your money. Because a sandblaster kinetic shell has a really high health, and your lambs is not going to be able to shoot them down, and you're just going to waste the lambs damage that would otherwise have to be used at shooting down actually scary chemical shells, you know, explosives, your frags, EMP, stuff like that. Maximum diameter to engage, I don't think that's a good idea, but if you are so sure that your other countermeasures, your other active defenses will be able to take out really big things like your huge missiles and stuff, you may not want to use your lambs to target them. But for me, lambs is the last line of defense, so if things got through to this point, you will absolutely want to target them. So yeah, except sandblasters. So I'm not going to set a maximum limit on this. Here we have a diameter priority multiplier. So you can basically make it prioritize larger or smaller things. So if you notice that your lambs performs poorly because they waste all their damage at big things or small things, you can basically set them to prioritize larger or smaller things. That's up to you. Now, lambs will do less damage the further away they shoot at. So you can see here, damage at 500 meters is right now 60%, and damage at 1000 meters is 36%. And that's of course not too good. So setting them at 1000 meters, which is the max, is not a recommendation of mine. I would set it to actually pretty close, maybe 150, 175 meters. And if you struggle at shooting down shells at this range, you can set them to higher. But I would begin with a pretty low value, like 150, and then you see if this works. And if it works, leave it at this, because that will leave more space for your other CIWS systems to target things further away from your ship. Again, lambs is the last line of defense. And that will basically keep and reserve the energy you have in your lambs for things you really need to shoot down. And then you also have an angle below which to engage. So default is 90 degrees. They will fire pretty widely at things. I usually decrease this on some of my ships, like the Gimli class. They are set like really low to they only have like tunnel vision. But it can be a good idea to set it to like 75 degrees or something lower than 90. Otherwise, you might target things that are a little bit, out of your scope. And then you can set up a color you like. Now you just click copy to all on vehicle. So click this button. And then you can see, the lambs is set up the same way on all of your connected nodes. Beautiful. And that basically concludes the lambs section, so we can cross that off. Now we're gonna go to General Kinetic CIWS Cannon. I'm sure you noticed the cannon in the background, and that's what I'm gonna show you how to make. This is again the hole which we're gonna have our CIWS cannon in, and as you can see, this cannon will fit perfectly in this hole. Alright, so this is the CIWS cannon we're going to make, and I'm just gonna show you like what we are looking for in a CIWS cannon. You can either choose between having 100mm or 50mm. It's that straightforward. It's gonna be either 50mm or 100mm. It has a shell speed of 156 meters per second. You have a rate of fire at 340 RPM. It's the autoloader. And then we have an ammo intake limit, which is a lot higher because we are going to use belt-fed autoloaders like this. So yeah, first off, you can see I also added a munition warning system, a little munition warner on this turret as well, to provide some backup for the detection of incoming stuff. Yeah, it's also a tiny bit rail assisted as well, but yeah. I'm just going to remove, excuse me, thank you. You may think it sounds a little bit strict to have like the option of having either a 50mm or a 100mm cannon. And yeah, I get what you mean, but this is because the shell we're gonna use, and they really only work better at like smaller calibers. And yes, 100mm is a smaller caliber in From the Depth. In any case, the shell we are going to use has 20 modules and has a heavy head followed by two stabilizer fin bodies. This will basically provide a pretty accurate shell. Even if you have recoil issues, it will be pretty accurate, and if you can mitigate your recoil issues, you will have a super accurate cannon. So this is the shell we have to work with, and you can see at 100mm it has a shell length plus casing of basically just under 2 meter, which means that they will fit in a 2 meter outloader. And as you will notice, if we change this to 50mm instead, it will basically be just under 1 meter. And that's the entire reason. So when you're building a cannon like this, again, you want to measure out how high you want it to be. And you basically use a one-axis turrets. It's going to be a pretty small cannon like this. And then you have the options to use. So in advanced cannon, you basically have the autoloaders. So either you can use 1 meter autoloader, you can use the belt-fed autoloader, or you can use the 2 meter autoloader. Now, I decided to use the belt-fed autoloader for this, and the reason I want to do that is because I want a high rate of fire with not too many autoloader, and this is on the cost that we are basically going to have lower. We're going to have some downtime when we are loading, because the belt-fed autoloaders, they're really good, but they suffer a little bit of a load time issue. So when you have no shells left, they will, you will need to load them before you can fire again. And yeah, then we should place them like this. And then we're gonna have the ammo inputs on both of the side of the gun. And this will require some Tetrising. We know really before that it's going to be a 3x3 turret. So as you could see on the previous cannon, if we have like 4 ammo intakes for each belt-fed autoloader, the downtime will be pretty low. Yeah, and when you're building a CIWS cannon, you want to be able to shoot in high arcs. So you basically need to use a 2 meter autoloader. And of course, your firing piece right behind of that, and we are connected up. Now I just realized that we're gonna have trouble fitting it here. So what we're going to do, we want to have the ability to snake our way to the front of it, because we do need some place of having the cooling, right? So now we have some place of having the cooling. Now we need some barrels, and the longer barrel you have, the more accurate you will be. So yeah, maybe 8 meters is okay, but yeah. Then I also want it to be a little bit railgun assisted. So we're going to add that there, and we can adjust that. That is optional. You don't need to make it rail assisted. You just can if you want to. And 1 railgun charger or more. You can make this basically have a lot of railgun chargers and make it really strong as well. The one I showed you was a little bit weaker like that, but I can just show you if we have some more, for example. Right, so when you're building the shell, we can use the preset shells, but of course I want to design a new shell. So we want to get it to 20 modules. We're gonna have it gunpowder casing all the way up until here, which we're gonna have a stabilizer fin body, and the head is gonna be a heavy head. And this is basically the shell that's most optimal of shooting at incoming shells, because we don't need high armor class or armor penetration value, since the incoming missiles and projectiles have a pretty low AC value, for example. So assign to all intakes, and you can see it here. If it were fired at 60 millimeters, it will have an AP class of 26, and the armor class of incoming missiles and shells happens to be 20. So yeah, that's very nice. And then you can basically check your gun. We of course need to go and set this up. So the APS should be 50 millimeter. And yeah, we can leave everything else as they were. If you have real cooling issues, you can of course use multiple barrels, but for this we want to increase our accuracy as much as possible, so for that reason it's better to have only one barrel and use our cooling with just adding coolers. And it can be a good idea to allow railgun to fire when partially charged, so you don't wait for the railgun. And you can just basically decrease this so you have the same firing rate as you would have without the railgun. Yes, you kind of match your railgun charge amount to the RPM of the cannon in general, so you just get the speed boost without limiting your rate of fire. Yeah, well, in any case, you can see that this has a rate of fire of 383 by autoloader, and we have a really high intake limit. So basically we need to add coolers until our cooling, yeah, one more, like that. So now we have a cooling limit of 393, which is 10 RPM higher than our autoloader limit, which is perfect. And now this is a little bit optional. You will get a better CIWS cannon if you will mitigate your recoil, but it's gonna be pretty expensive to mitigate your recoil, and you might just hate doing Tetris. So this is up to you. But the recoil is 7,000 per second, and we have an absorption of only 2,000 per second. So now you'll need to use all of your Tetris capabilities of making a good Tetris. This takes this takes a long time, making Tetris like this to mitigate and fit them inside the turret design. That's why I rebuilt the cannon first, and I can show you my selected Tetris if you would just want to copy my design later. But basically, find ways to fit enough of these, and of course inside the 3x3 area, otherwise it will not work. So this is bad placement, obviously. But yeah, now you can see we have mitigated the recoil and our gun will be extremely accurate. So basically, what's the rate of fire? 0.16 seconds per shot. Well, then we just go into the railgun part. And in the railgun section here, you can see you have an untouchable energy reserve. So it can be a good idea that your CIWS cannon doesn't use the energy to, which isn't really required to work, to basically drain your batteries totally. So set this to at least 10% so you have some stuff for other things left. In any case, here you see maximum energy per shot. Drag this down to 1, and then you basically scroll up until you can reach, okay, maybe like this. And then we scroll until we match the 0.16 metric. Just like that. And then you have perfectly set up the maximum energy per shot to the railgun. Yeah, well, anyways, you can see here 0.16 seconds. So if you just take this a little bit lower, so it's just 16 and not almost 0.20 seconds, that's gonna be better, so you don't accidentally limit your fire rate. Anyways, you can see that's a quite nice little boost, and if you miss all the time, you can of course use some of the energy for accuracy, but again, it's better to use double fin with your shell setup as I showed you, and using recoil absorption. That's a cheaper way to get better accuracy. So that is that. You can also, of course, check the accuracy. So if you set this to on the shell to 50 millimeter, you can basically look at what the accuracy is required to have full accuracy. So you need at least 7.2 meters of barrel, but having a bit more than this is, of course, recommended. If you're using a very railgun heavy cannon, you probably need more than 1 meter of railgun barrel in order to provide this little, boost for the shells. In case your capacity is too low, especially for like 100 millimeter CIWS. Very nice. That is basically how to set up a CIWS cannon as the cannon itself. Now we're gonna look at the controller and the settings for that. Alright, so now we have set up the gun. Of course, you have to clean it up and add armor on your gun as well. We're going to look at the gun I built previously a little bit more if you want some inspiration. But right now, we're going to look at the settings. So when you build a CIWS gun, you have different options. Like you can use the closing weapon system controller as it is, or you can use the all-in-one. If you use the close-in, like this one, which is much cheaper, you need to go to the AI and you need to select a failsafe from there and a wireless transceiver and connect it up to it. If you use the all-in-one variant, they are kind of included into the system. So this basically makes a gun that aims at incoming projectiles automatically for you. It's very handy. You can also, it doesn't really matter much which AI it's connected up to. So just leave it at channel 1, your main AI. Right, so basically there are a set of rules you can use. You can also set up a set of rules for locked target rule set. Personally, I think the main rule set is enough. I don't really use the locked target rule set. And there are some different things which you can add. So you basically add a rule and you can have ignore inside, ignore outside, wait inside, and wait. So basically you can have a ignore something within a certain range or outside a certain range, or you can have the wait values, which is basically a preference, not ignore, but basically choose this instead of this if you have multiple options. And I'm going to have ignore outside, ignore inside, 0 to 50. And also make sure that this little box is checked, otherwise the rule is temporarily removed. Anyways, so this is ignore inside 0 to 50, and this is speed, meters per second. So if a projectile goes slower than 50 meters per second, we're just not gonna bother. And this is because our vehicle goes about 50 meters per second, so we don't want our CIWS system to target torpedoes or missiles that just can't reach us, you know? Then we also have an ignore outside. And this is outside this range. So from 125 meters, so this is the distance to the projectile, so here we have all the values. So ignore outside 125 meters to 2,300 meters. And this is a little bit high. We can probably drag this a little bit down, but this will suffice. Basically, we are now going to ignore things that are closer than 125 meters, basically the lamb's distance. So if they get that close, we're not going to shoot at them. And the reason why we do that is that we don't want the gun to aim and snap around at all different places. We want them to aim in the general direction of incoming projectiles so that we can switch target and shoot at the next projectile fast instead of it going back and forth. If we set this to 0 instead, it's going to shoot at things that are super close, and then it's going to take some time for it to basically aim at the projectile which is further away again, which loses DPS dealt to incoming targets. Then we set up another rule, which is ignore outside, and this is angle of incidence. this is basically a preset. I think it's set to 70 or something. If you go into a clean local weapon controller, you can see here that it only has ignore outside and angle of incidence. An incidence is basically the angle towards the projectile. So this is the projectile's velocity of the projectile and the direction from the projectile to the weapon. So basically, if the angle is 0, so this goes from 0 to 40. So if it's 0, it's coming dead on to the weapon, and if it's like 40, it's moving, it's on an angle away, and if it's like really high, it's basically not on the way of hitting the ship anyways. So you want to have this angle of incidence so that you're only aiming at things that are about to hit your ship. So that's what that does, and all of the values that has a little degree mark in the corner or in brackets, that basically means that it is calculation intensive on your computer. So if you have a CIWS system with a lot of these, with a small, like you can have so many rules and make them really, really good. You can add 100 rules to this and make your CIWS you can make your CIWS cannon very polished and very good at just doing its job. But if you have too many of this, you might lag the system a little bit, especially if you have a lot of CIWS cannons and a lot of complex rules. And then I also added this weight angle of incidence. So basically, this will make us prefer by a factor of 5 or -5, prefer targets that are basically going towards the CIWS cannon dead on, and the ones that are going a little bit further away, we're going to prioritize less, so that we have maximum chance of actually hitting them and not getting the CIWS cannon killed. So you can set up your own rules, play around as much as you want to, but if you don't want to do that, you can just copy these rules and set them up just like this, and you're gonna have the same results as I have in this video. Now, when you're happy, you can click copy, or of course, I guess you're setting it up directly on your cannon. So here we add this CIWS controller, and we go in here, we go to the rule set, and we click paste, and there we have them. Now, we need to set this to priority maximum. So if there is a thing to shoot at, a projectile, it will prioritize to shoot at a projectile. Then we're going to go to AI, local weapon controller, all-in-one local weapon controller. And we're going to add one here. We're going to make sure this has minimum priority. And we can set this up to not shoot at things that are too far away, so 4,000 meters might be enough. We don't need to shoot at things underwater, that is enemies underwater, and yeah. So basically, if there is no projectiles incoming to shoot at, according to the rules we have set up here, if there is no projectiles to shoot at, it will instead target the enemy itself, and basically work as a makeshift sandblaster. So that is the way we're setting this up. Pretty clean and simple. Now, this is a little trick to look at your cannons when you build them. You can set to view the weight of the components, and you don't see the decoys or mimics or stuff like that. So now you can see how this cannon actually looks like. You can see I have cleverly hidden the recoil absorbers into this. This cannon in particular requires less recoil absorbers because it's using much less railgun charge to shoot. And other than that, it's basically identical to the one we set up. I do recommend to have some heavy armor on the cannon in the general direction it's going to face to make it survive a little bit longer. For CIWS cannons, I generally do not recommend using heavy barrels because that will limit the speed the barrel can snap and move to different targets, and thus that will also limit like the travel time between shooting at different projectiles, and that also makes it be able to shoot less at stuff. And if your CIWS cannon is a little bit larger, or like this large, but you want it to be more snappy, it can actually be a good idea to not use the 1 meter, but to use the 3 meter 1-axis turret block. And that is a decent way of setting up a CIWS system, or a general DPS kinetic CIWS, which is technically the best CIWS at shooting at missiles and CRAM in terms of materials spent getting them out from the air. Now, you won't get away with only having kinetic CIWS because of course they don't target APS shells, while we do have our LAMS system. Yes. Now we are going to go to the next point in question, where we are also going to use the all-in-one CIWS controller. We are, however, not going to use a backup all-in-one local weapon controller, because that is not needed. But before we do that, I feel that it is also time to take our gun, which we indeed have saved, and install it where it should go. It's right there. Beautiful. Now it is correctly set up. And you can also mount a secondary all-in-one local CIWS controller on your vehicle also, if you want to have kind of a backup. So I don't know if it can reach it there. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we can actually fit one inside of here. So I'm going to remove a little block inside of there. And now we have a spot where we can put a backup CIWS controller. So we're just going to put it here. We're going to make it max priority minus some, so that it only kicks in if it has to be used. Then we're going to switch this 2 cells in each direction to 4 cells left and right. And this is the reason I basically put it in the left and right configuration. So I did, instead of putting it like this, I switched it and put it like that. Now the block basically looks the same when you look at it, but if you click G, you are basically aligning it in a direction, as you can probably see a little bit from the animation. Yeah. And since you can set it to left and right 4 meters, then you can make it actually reach this turret block, which it has to reach to be able to control it. Now basically main rule set, we paste in what we have what we set up for the other one, so that it will be reliable like that. And of course, making sure that our ammo intake is set up to the right ammo controller, because we're going to remove the spawned ammo controller on the main construct and use the shell I set up with you in this video. And we can write in CIWS there as the name, so we know what it is all about. All right. And now you can take control over your weapons and see if you can aim them. And I can already see that actually I made a little mistake with the barrel here. So if we go down to the spin lock, where is it? We should probably be getting some. No. I'll actually need to do like this to show you what's going on. So, idle azimuth. You can see that the actual barrel's placement is actually colliding a little bit here with our decking. So this is something I'll have to fix. Either I'll need to elevate the turret a little bit, or I'll need to remove the decking that is causing the collision. Actually, I'll need to elevate the turret 1 block. Because obviously otherwise our cannon will not be able to shoot at things that are incoming. Yeah, I realize now that the cannon I built a little bit quickly with you in this video would work perfectly here, because it actually had its barrel 1 meter higher up. Oh well. And I realized this is also pretty like common things you'll have to fix when you're building yourself, so I'm just gonna show you how to elevate it one block higher. I removed the turret, of course. I already moved the all-in-one CIWS controller one block upwards. So then I'm gonna right-click to remove this, and I'm gonna left-click to spawn what I copied here. Then I am going to take this and basically add armor around it again. Just like that. And then, of course, in the bottom where we had the turret, we are going to add another layer. And also a little tip here, adding a little beam of heavy armor just for the turret to stand on can make them survive a lot longer. Then we take the turret we've built and saved again, and we'll just click G to align it in the right direction, and we can spawn it here. And now we basically solve this issue, so we can aim it all around. And yeah, seems to be working pretty a-okay. Nice. So next system. General kinetic CIWS cannon with also DPS is now ticked off. So now we're going to go to MDB flak CIWS diff turret versus CRAM and larger missiles. So this is what we're going to build here, and this is like really simple to build. Here we have an all-in-one local weapon controller. I'm gonna show you basically what we have here. So you can either copy this or you can play around with your own values if you want to. So here you can see we have different stats. Locked target, we have nothing. Main rule set is the thing we use. And also idle. Aim at enemy is pretty good because that will make it usually aim in the approximate direction of where new shells will come from anyways. Main rule set. The same as before, ignore inside speed. So if anything is 0 to 50 meters per second, a projectile is that slow, we're just gonna ignore it. Then we have ignore outside distance. So between 150 meters to 800 meters, we are not going to shoot at stuff. And 800 meters seems to be pretty close, but we don't want to waste ammo on things that are not going to hit us. So we have some stricter rules for the DIF-CIWS system than we have for the kinetic CIWS. The DIF-CIWS, as said, only has basically 5 shots per encounter, because using diff weapons makes the reload time so extremely slow when you have wasted those 5 shots. You're gonna see that later. Then we do have a ignore outside projectile diameter. So here you can see diameter for projectile, 250 for small missile, 500 for medium, 1000 for large. So we're going to begin at 1000 and go up to 2000. So basically this will make it target all large missiles, all huge missiles, and all CRAM cannons. If you set this to 1001 to 2000, that will basically make it target almost all CRAM cannons and huge missiles. If you want to avoid large missiles, if you have a really big ship that can take some large missiles, then you can do that. Otherwise, 1000 to 2000 is good. So we're going to ignore outside basically anything that's smaller than 1000 or larger, even though that doesn't exist in From the Depth. As of now, at least. Right. Then we have weight type of projectile. So here it says that 1 for missile, 2 for CRAM. So for missiles, it's -3. For CRAMs, it's +3. So basically, it's going to prioritize shooting at CRAM cannons rather than shooting at missiles if it has to choose. And we have an ignore outside angle of incidence, so 0 to 70 degrees, a little bit wider, but again, yeah, they do only target things that are shooting at a closer range. Then we also have weight, number of CIWS aiming. So if a lot of other CIWS systems are aiming at the said projectile, it will basically ignore it, or not ignore it, it will like soft ignore it. If the other cannons are aiming at said projectile, it will have -10 as priority, and if that's up to 10, so this is kind of if you have a lot of CIWS cannons, so that if 10 of them are aiming at the thing, it will like prioritize it 10 times less, kind of. And if 0 are aiming at it, it will kind of prioritize it very much. So that is a little spectra to kind of spread out how many CIWS guns are aiming at said projectiles. So especially if we have a number of DIF-CIWS cannons, we want to make sure that they are aiming at different projectiles, because otherwise we'll probably not shoot down all of them, and then we will be critted anyways, and that will be very sad. Yeah, so this is what we're gonna use. So take this and copy it. Now you can also do this. You don't need to copy it as said. You can also click Ctrl+C on like this, and then you can like spawn a new one, and then Ctrl+V, and all the rules will be pasted in. You can also copy the rules here and paste them in here as you wish. In any case, the shell we're going to use is basically very simple. It uses a munition defense head, munition defense bodies all the way to the base, a timed fuse, and 2 gunpowder casings. This at 500mm, which is something we're going to use, will require us to have 3 meters of barrel to even use the gunpowder. For the maximum accuracy, we don't need to have the maximum accuracy because we are basically firing at pretty short range. Now, so how to make a DIF-CIWS cannon? Well, it's pretty simple. The easiest way, just going here to take a 2-axis turret and spawn a 2-axis turret. On this 2-axis turret, you will have a defense, close and weapon system, all-in-one CIWS controller. Paste in the rules, which we just discussed, pause the video and read from them here if you need to. When that is set up, we basically need to build our CRAM cannon. We need to build our advanced cannon. Go and find a firing piece. Now you want to have as many gauge increasers as you can fit in here, using the least amount of coolers you need, because this is basically wasted potential. Because the cooler, we don't really need the coolers, they are not important for this. So we're going to try and minimize the amount of coolers, but we still want to get the gauge up to 500mm. So you basically have to provide something that closely resembles what you want. So here we have 456mm. Now this is actually okay. If you want to make a little bit of a smaller CIWS, DIF-CIWS cannon, you can actually set it to 456mm as well. But you might want to have 500mm, and then it could look like this, for example. Now, maybe for the correct amount of rotation and to be able to aim at all the spots we want to aim at, we may want to add it like that. And yeah. Do it as you wish, it doesn't really matter, it's gonna be a very cheap weapon. Then you can select a 3-meter barrel or a 4-meter barrel if you want slightly less accuracy. You need to make sure that the firing piece is exposed from all the sides, so you can add 1, 2, 3, and 4 ammo inputs directly onto the APS firing piece. DIF stands for Direct Input Fed APS cannon. So that is what this is. We are directly inputting the ammo on the APS firing piece. And now we want to set up a shell here. So we're going to create a new shell design. We're going to click Edit. We can name this flak or whatever you feel. By the way, this slider is only to view your stats. It doesn't matter for how the gun will perform. Take this up to 20. Select 1, 2. Click Munition Defense Body. Click Fill to Head with the Munition Defense Body. take the head and switch that also to a munition defense head, so we have some better aerial properties. You can have an armor piercing instead in the front if you wanted to have slightly less damage, but go a little bit faster. That's also cool. Now, for the rearmost part of the shell, close to the gunpowder, or it doesn't actually matter, but you want to have a timed fuse somewhere on it. The timed fuse, you don't need to set that up, it's okay as it is, and this is the shell we're gonna use. So now you click assign, and assign to all intakes. And now you can see when you're hovering over this, can reload in 682 seconds. That is like several minutes. I think, isn't that like 10 minutes? I don't know, it's a long time, so it will only be used, like each of these will only be used once per battle. Now, I said 5 shots per DIF-CIWS cannon because the gun can actually have 1 shell chambered already in the APS firing piece when you spawn it into combat, either in tournament or in the netter. Like when you spawn in the ship, when you load in the ship, it will be preloaded. Alright, so that is basically that. It's now set up and ready to go. We now only need a laser targeter somewhere on the gun. And it doesn't have to have like visual on the enemy or anything like that. We can add it here. And this is basically how to set up a DIF-CIWS cannon. You can see if we take control over this and like shoot, we're basically shooting a telephone pole of munition defense. Yeah, anti-warhead stuff. And you might think that my little CIWS cannon looks really nice here. And thank you, it looks very nice. If I remove the decoys, you can see it's about as simple as this thing. It has nothing fancy. It's just... yeah. It actually has a gauge increaser there, yeah. Now you can see how it really looks like. It's like very sad. It's no armor. These are incredibly cheap. You may notice that I use the regular CIWS controller, a failsafe, and a wireless receiver like this, and that's only to save cost. It's nothing practical about that. I usually use the all-in-one CIWS controller. I just wanted to see how cheap I could make a one. If you don't like the sound of 500mm guns, you can go into the APS and you can scroll down once, so you have 499.99. That means it basically is a 500mm weapon, but it doesn't sound like one. It sounds weird, but I prefer that a little bit. Now you can just save down your cannon. That's gonna be your CIWS cannon. Add some decos on it if you want to make it look nice. I decided to name mine GMODISM Industries Type 0 DIF-CIWS 500mm. And as you can see, I managed to make this one cost 820 materials, which is absolutely nothing. That's so cheap. Yeah, that is basically how to make a DIF-CIWS cannon. I think you should have at least 2 on a ship like this. More if you can. They will save your ass from big damage projectiles and stuff like that. They are very, very, very handy and very good to have. But of course, it's a little bit hard to place them down before we have a proper superstructure. So we're only going to plonk down a couple of them at some random locations for the time of being. Maybe we can make a good superstructure in a previous or like in a following up video. And if you want to see that, just write in the comments how you would want this little mini series to be followed up. As for now, I'm just gonna take my saved CIWS cannon and I'm going to add a couple of them. So I'm gonna add one here, maybe like this actually, and maybe one here. Actually, I wanted to stand on something. Beautiful. Now we have 4 DIF-CIWS cannons. And if we have a superstructure in the middle here, you can just easily set up some rotation, azimuth rotation limitations, so it doesn't aim towards the ship. But of course, it's good if you have a failsafe, which you already have in case you chose the all-in-one CIWS controller. You can see down on the right here that our ammunition is struggling a little bit. When you use a lot of diff guns, you need more ammunition than the game tells you need. So that's something good to keep in mind, that you may need to add a couple of extra ammo barrels. Otherwise, if you have a lot of DIF-CIWS or diff cannons, you can use diff cannons for damage as well, but that's beyond this tutorial. But it can be a good idea to check that ammo access down in the lower right corner and make sure you don't have problems there when the ship is in use. In that case, you need more ammo. And that's basically it for the MDB, Munition Defense Flak DIF-CIWS. So we can cross that off. Next up, we're going to look at interceptors and torpedo interceptors. We're going to begin with looking a little bit at making torpedo interceptors, because they are a little bit easier / forgiving to set up, since we can EMP the entire system and just make it, well, self-contained, so to say. So right now we are cutting out a piece of the hull, which we're going to use as the space for them. It can be a good idea that they are closer to the rear, because some of the torpedoes chasing you, which don't have too good prediction guidance, may come up from the rear. So that can be a smart idea, so that they are basically there and that they are not running into propellers and stuff like that. Right, so I have EMP insulated a little 3x3 area here, and we're going to use this space to build our torpedo interceptors. I'm going to use a medium system. You can use small missiles and large missiles to make this as well. Now, to make it have a nice connection point without adding blocks to the other side, we can do a little hack. We can use the aerodynamic hatched gantry instead. Now, this will also make them a little bit armored and thus a little stronger against incoming damage. Right, so now we need to add some connectors here, like this, and then a little missile controller. We can do like that. And we also want a identify friend or foe module, because otherwise we might accidentally target our own missiles, our torpedoes specifically, if we do have them. Then we do also have a little staggered fire. Now this is completely optional, but when we have 9 of them, it can be a good idea to space them out a little bit, since torpedoes will go for a long way. Just spreading them out a little bit will basically make sure that we deal more consistent damage and that less damage is wasted, but don't make them so staggered that they basically are not being able to being fired at maximum speed. So each of these has a reload time of like 15 seconds, so you can see that my delay of 0.75 seconds or 0.75, yeah, is pretty adequate of spreading them out. So to set up the torpedo interceptor, we will basically go into it, select a torpedo propeller. Then we need an APN guidance. We can leave this at 2. Oh, and before the APN guidance, we need a fin. So a torpedo propeller, a fin, APN guidance, leave this at 2. And then at the nose, we should have a torpedo, a missile interceptor, which also works underwater. Now we're going to select this target only missiles, because we only want to target missiles for this. Warhead arming delay, can decrease it a little bit. Guidance activation delay, we should set it to 0. Thrust before locking can be 100%. We should go here, make sure that the ramp up time is like 1.5 seconds, something like that should be good enough. Then we just click copy to matching launch pads like this, and all of them will now be correctly set up as torpedo interceptors. To make this thing fire at the things we want to fire at, we're going to have an all-in-one local weapon controller right here. And no, actually, I'm sorry, that's wrong. We're going to go to defense and select the close-in weapon system controller, which is the all-in-one CWS controller I meant. Right, and for this we're gonna set up a little rule set. So we have a main rule set. We're gonna remove angle of incidence, and we are going to add ignore outside. Then we're gonna have type of projectile, and we are going to leave it at 1. So we're gonna ignore outside 1, which means that we are not going to target CRAM shells, which usually don't come from underwater. Then we're going to have a other little thing here, which is also going to be a ignore outside. Then we're gonna have altitude of the projectile. And the altitude is, of course, the altitude of the projectile. So we're going to drag this down to -200 meters. And this one, the maximum value, we can set at 0. So it's basically only going to target projectiles that are underwater, which is just what we want. And it can be a good idea to add a little weight value here. So we can have a distance. Right, so the weight and the distance to the projectile. I don't really know what the max distance you can detect a torpedo at, but let's say 2000 meters. So at range max, we're gonna add a -10, and at range min, we're gonna add a lot. So we do want to target things that are close to us by that's like the most important thing to shoot at, of course. So that is the rule set which we're going to have, and for this we can actually remove the failsafe. It serves no purpose here, so it only risks limiting our firepower. And that's basically a torpedo setup. So torpedo interceptor setup. So this will now shoot at torpedoes and kill them, which is very nice. Make sure to not put them too close to the propellers so that they are not basically accidentally hitting the propellers and being destroyed. And as you know, we do need to have passive sonar, active sonar, preferably 90-degree active sonar, in order to detect torpedoes at all. And if you have that, you should be able to shoot them down with this little system. So you can prefab this and save it. They will be called the Army of GMODISM Fish Torpedo Interceptor Pack, Medium Missile 9, because it's 9 of them. Beautiful, and if you're a commissioned officer in the Army of GMODISM, you can access this file in your file as well. And this should be the torpedo interceptors set up and nice. Now, when we are making regular interceptors, it can be a little bit harder to set them up to actually shoot at incoming CRAM shells and stuff like that. You'll have to be a little bit more careful on how you set up stuff. We are, however, going to have a remote missile. So we are going to use a remote CWS controller. So right here, we are going to go to defense. And since we don't need a failsafe, we're going to use this close-in weapon system controller right here. Since we're going to have missiles at different locations, we're basically hiding away a missile controller inside of here. So we're just going to take a missile controller and we are going to plant it. Oh my, this is going to be a little bit difficult. I'll need to move around some stuff in order to fit everything here. Or actually, we can just build it on this side. Yeah, that's probably a smarter idea. Right, there we go. And now again, a missile controller. So we're just adding a missile controller here in this little insulated space. And on top of our missile controller, we need to attach a identify friend or foe so we don't shoot at our stuff. And below the missile controller, we need to have a wireless transmitter. Now, set this up at a channel that is not used. I usually use my interceptors at channel 9. And yeah, inside of this, you don't need to set this up. Make just sure that use accuracy on hull is not checked. It's not checked by default. So yeah. And it can also be a good idea to check AI control only, since you don't want to fire your interceptors when you are taking control of your weapons. And yeah, that's actually something we should do for this missile controller, for the torpedoes as well. Set it to AI control only. Right, so now we can go back here and we go to the CIWS controller. And we're going to set up some main rule sets. And for this, we want an angle of incidence of 50 degrees so that we're not shooting at things that are basically not going to hit us anyways. We are going to ignore outside distance. So between 250 meters-ish, shooting at things closer than this will we don't have the reaction time to shoot at it. So it's not possible. That's why we're not going to waste materials on shooting missiles at things that are already too close. LAMs will deal with those. And the distance, maximum distance you can hit stuff is about 1,500 meters-ish in my testing for this type of setup, so that will be fine. It can be a little bit lower than that, but that's usually fine. Then we're going to have a weight. So the weight or projectile diameter, we're basically prioritizing things that are larger, and we are deprioritizing things that are smaller, because the larger stuff are usually more scary. And there we have it. Now we can use our launchers at different locations. We can set up launchers that are EMP insulated. We can also not do that. We can choose as we like. I'm going to do both, but for the front launchers here, we're going to set up a few that are not EMP insulated. They are surrounded by wood, so they don't have, they are semi-EMP insulated. And now comes the important thing. To be able to shoot at CRAM shells, you need a pretty steep arc. And to get the steep arc, you can use the reverse launch pad. We're going to use medium for these ones as well. And we're just going to add 2 blocks like this. We can also use the aerodynamic hatch if we like to have them a little bit armored. To connect them up, we of course need to connect them to using some connectors like that and a wireless receiver. Connected up these blocks and connected up to channel 9. And now these are connected, which means that these are connected, which is absolutely very fine. And wherever we would like to have interceptors, we should spread them out a little bit at different places. So for example, we can have a few interceptors here. We don't really know where the superstructure is going to be actually, but we usually want to have them at some different locations so we have some sort of redundancy and increased chance of hitting whatever is trying to shoot at us. Maybe we will remove them or move them around in videos in the future, but right now we're adding a little system right here and we're adding a little rear system here, so we have quite a bit of them. Now, you don't want to have staggered fire when it comes to these ones, because you want all of them to react and shoot at whatever you can react on. And now, there are some very specific settings you'll need for this type of interceptor, so I'm gonna show you them. I don't remember the values in my head, so I'm just gonna spawn in a little pre-set up insulated unit so I can take a little look at basically the data, the exact settings. Okay, so here we have it. They are upside down and these settings are as follow. So keep notes or pause the video. This is what you need. Ramp time 0.1 seconds, thrust output 3000, that's max. Start delay going to be 0.6 seconds, that's quite important. This is just for style, but I have the ion trail, flame visibility hidden, that's just because I think they look annoying when you spam interceptors. Purely aesthetic, as said, but the start delay of 0.6 seconds is quite important. Then we have the warhead arming delay, 0.2, activation, guidance activation delay 0 seconds, thrust before locking 100%, free internal used for fuel, C-scheme and guidance, no munition decorator block placed here, so that's, yeah, well, whatever. You can use munition decorator, I refer to you on my other tutorials if you want to use that. I'm just gonna spawn in the thing I always use. If you want my missile Decopium, you can actually download it because they are accessible on the build platform. Not the platform Mark III, but the Army of GMODISM style board, it's called. Anyways, gonna select this decorator and add them to all. So they basically look like a simple arrow now, isn't that nice? As said, on the Army of GMODISM style board, you can copy the Army of GMODISM missiles. These will now react at incoming missiles, CRAM shells, and whatnot, and just instantly try and kill them. It's gonna be pretty effective at doing this. And I think I want some extra missiles in the front here as well. Very nice. And there are no stagger between them, so whenever something gets close that are scary, each of them are going to fire. If you feel that you overkill incoming things all the time by these missiles alone, then you can add a staggered fire. But I would advise you to test it first, because this is really set up in order to deal with incoming Doom CRAM shells, for example. So each one of this has a, so say it's a 2000 meter CRAM, for example, or I mean 2000 millimeter, a 2 meter CRAM shell. Then we can deal 4000 damage per missile. And according to my calculator, that's 72,000 damage. So this ship can, by using these interceptors alone, deal 72,000 damage to the incoming CRAM shell, which is, well, most in-game CRAM shells will be killed by this. And if you're building Doom CRAMs, you know that the health of your CRAMs can't really be lower than 100,000 is a bit low, 200,000 is okay, 400,000 usually gets through most people's defenses. But yeah, this is of course a very small ship compared to those types of CRAM cannons, but nevertheless, this is a pretty decent defense. Remember that each of these missiles do cost a good bit, at like 600 per dis. So we're up to 800 and then 400 plus that. So that's like, is that like 1200? Yeah, it's expensive is what I'm trying to say, to use missiles. So yeah, imagine that each missile basically costs like a DIF-CIWS weapon. So that's why you understand why the Gimli class has spammed DIF-CIWS weapons. That is interceptors and torpedo interceptors checked off the list. Next up is smoke and laser warners. Smoke and laser warner is thankfully pretty straightforward. It's not very complex. One thing to keep in mind, however, with the laser warners is that they are EMP susceptible. So if you really want to protect them, you unfortunately need to place them you know, on rubber and stuff like that to make them not killable by EMP. Looks like we don't have a munition thing. Did I not have the symmetry plane? What happened? Who knows? In any case, we're going to add some laser warners, and as you may imagine, we will spread them out on the vehicle wherever they may be useful. We don't need a lot of them, and I can just spawn a smoke here. You can see how large of an area this smoke covers. It is pretty large, so that's very good. The laser warner basically is a detection block. It will pick up laser damage to the vehicle within a radius of 20 meters. And it can thus trigger smoke dispensers. It basically sees, so it needs some type of clear line of sight to the vehicle. And here you can see that we can actually replace one of this with a laser warner. So for initial frontal damage, laser damage usually doesn't come from above. So we don't really need to think of defending from laser from above. Do keep in mind, however, that a laser warner needs to be over water in order to work. Or I think it does, at least. Well, underwater laser isn't really relevant anyways, because laser does so bad damage underwater that even though you can use them underwater, people just don't, because that doesn't make much sense. And then I think we may need a laser warner in the middle of the craft as well, so we basically have 3 sections. And then we're going to try and add smoke dispensers. So a smoke dispenser to target, to defend us from the front. So for example, we only really need to consider things that are above water here again. And you should also keep in mind that the smoke dispenser, that's a little bit EMP susceptible as well. So when you're hiding them inside the craft like we are right now, it can actually be worthwhile to EMP insulate them with a little bit of rubber. So this is the first section. Then we basically need another section here for the middle of the ship. So maybe like that, maybe a bit further back, something like this. And you will notice that this will also smoke our lamps, so the lamps will be a little bit less effective. We can, if we want to, carefully place the smoke dispenser so that the lamp systems are left out, like this for example. Then the lamp system will not be shooting through smoke and will thus be a little bit more effective. And of course, we do this on the knowledge that this exact part of the ship will not really be defended from lasers. So it is a trade-off, as they say. And for the middle of the ship here, we can see something like here. Now it's impossible to not make this middle lamps node. It will be targeted, and we're probably going to have some superstructure here, so I will decide to place this a little bit higher like that. And then we have a rearmost section of the ship, perhaps somewhere around there. We can carefully not cover the rear lamps. So we can be a little bit semi-efficient like that. We can add it here for the time of being, that will be fine. Now we just need to set them up. So the smoke dispenser, material use per second, set this to max so that they actually do the maximum amount of laser protection they can do. We can trigger them for 20 seconds. And a material fraction, basically if we have too little materials left, I usually set this to a bit lower, but we want to keep 10% of the material, or maybe actually 15% at least, to deal damage and stuff, so we don't trigger the smokes in case we are low on materials. Then we just click apply to all. And as for the laser warner, we will choose if we want to warn on missile laser. So if your enemy uses laser-guided missiles, you can use the smoke to basically make those laser-guided missiles kind of miss. But I don't want to accidentally trigger any smoke so that our lamps get weaker by that, so I'm gonna uncheck this. But it's a really good idea to have this checked if you have a small evasive fast boat, for example. Then you may want the laser guided missiles to have a chance of actually missing you. Right, warn if laser hits within 20 meters is the default. I usually have this a bit higher to 30 blocks so that it's better to trigger more smoke than necessary than to trigger too little smoke. Deploy smokes within the range of 10 blocks. So now you can see here, basically, are we more than 10 blocks away? I think we are. So set this to something that will definitely cover your smoke blocks. You can quickly look at how wide or long your ship is. The ship is 29 meters wide. So 30 should probably be enough. So we're gonna set it to 30 and deploy up to 1 smokes per warning. We can set this to deploy up to 2 smokes per warning if 1 smoke got destroyed or whatever, you know. And 1 second between warning, that can be as it is. Now just click apply to all. And now you basically look at this, make sure that you think that this will be able to reach this smoke. And look at this, you can see here, it should be definitely less than 30 blocks away. And for this frontal one, it should be less than 30 blocks away. Okay, good. You basically set up a anti-laser smoke system. So we can check this off the list. Very nice. Now we're going to set up some shields. So we are going to specifically look at the planar projector shields. You can use ring shields as well, of course, but they are a little bit more straightforward. Just add a lot of them so that the ring invisible plane is in the direction you want to not receive damage. And now you can see that, for example, just adding a lot of these makes our armor class 5 bonus to the sides, which is nice. You can unfortunately not combine ring shields and planar shields, and these planar shield projectors are usually a bit better. Why most people use them. The planar shields are unfortunately also EMP susceptible. They can be a little bit hard to EMP secure and armor, so you will have to decide how you want to do this for your craft. But just to take a little look, the range should be set to max if you can afford it, and the size should be set to max if you need it, and the angle, the azimuth angle, can be 0, but the elevation angle should be set to max, which is like 45 degrees, if you can, because that will definitely increase its performance or likelihood that it will actually work. Effect strength should be set to 10 if you can afford it. It takes a lot of engine power to run strong shields like this, so you will have to do your you can set them at a slightly less steep angle to cover more area. You can decrease the effect strength a little bit. You can decrease the range they are working at as well, but do keep in mind that the longer away they are, the further away the shield is from its projector, the faster they will regenerate. You can see max strength regeneration is like 0.57 per second, and at max range it is 2.19 per second. So they are much more regenerative when they are further away. Why we want to keep them far away if we can afford it. Right, so basically what you need to do now is to find out where you should place these shields down. So for example, here? Can we place them down there? Can we place them around here? That should be pretty reasonable. Is this a reasonable? Yeah, that's probably pretty reasonable. So we can add this, make sure we have it like that. We can move. You can see now we have a gap in the shields. So one block further this way, okay. One block more further this way. They are now very strong like that. And we go and add, let's see here, yeah, that will be fine. Now you can see we already have issues with power. We are using too much power because the shields we have added are too strong. You may wonder, why are the shields pointing down like this? Why are they not pointing up instead? That is because when a shell comes in here and gets deflected, it will be deflected downwards. If the shields were pitching up instead, they would get deflected upwards, and then our lamps would waste its energy on them. So that's a little smart hack. Now, I think this amount of shield should suffice a little bit. Yeah, I guess that will be fine. I still want to protect the CIWS cannon in the front here a little bit, so I am going to add a little shield here in the front as well. Maybe not exactly there, but maybe at a reasonable distance. That might be actually very nice. So we can just make it a little bit smaller, perhaps have a nice little azimuth angle like that. Perhaps even a little bit of a lesser range. Yeah. Then I can take that value, copy it, paste it, and I can see here that the azimuth negative value should be removed. So we basically invert it, and yeah, that's very fine. We now set up a nice shield. Now, we should also, if we want to, we can set the color. If you want shields, but you think they are super ugly, just drag down alpha so that you can't see them anymore. I like to have them red at a small little alpha, so we can kind of see them, but they are not being obnoxious. For this sake of this tutorial, I will make them a little bit stronger, so that they are noticeable when we do the testing. I did just drag down the strength on a lot of them, so they are not really visible. Yeah. Now, this is all nice, but you can see they are basically having the risk of falling out. So I will thus EMP insulate the ones that we can. So for example, if we EMP insulate a shield block, we basically need to surround it by a block of rubber like this. Now we can add scaffolding just for the time of being. So if we want to EMP insulate this, it looks like that. And we'll have to add this. Yeah. You probably get what I mean here. This is like semi-EMP-ish. Oh no, it actually touches metal. This is not EMP resistant, but whatever. That will just have to deal with it. So you can or you cannot EMP insulate them, but they will survive longer if you do. And if you want to have multiple layers of shields, like if you stack shields on top of each other, note that it will only be the first shield taking contact with the projectile that will actually be calculated. If it bypasses the first shield, it will actually bypass the rest of the shields. So having multiple stacked shields doesn't offer any bonus really. It just makes it more expensive. So do keep that in mind, that stacking shields doesn't work like you may have hoped. Now, I'm going to shamelessly spawn my Blocks Systems LLC port and starboard named shield projector smart switch. This is what will control so that the shields on only one of the side will be useful or will be used. So Port is of course red, green is starboard. So now you can see what this basically does. This is a ACB. So what you need to go to the ACB and you need to spawn 4 ACBs. To my knowledge, you can't really do this painlessly with breadboard, so for this we'll need to resort for ACBs. Now, they are set up like this. The condition is the enemy, the bearing to the enemy is 1 degree to 1.79 degrees. And this, so the enemy bearing is what we're calculating here. So this basically makes it be port. And if that happens, it controls shield projectors. It's a little bit hard to see the check boxes here, but you can see here weapon and defenses. Here we have the shield projector. This is checked. And then we selected set drive factor, and this sets it to 10. So we may not really afford this, but yeah. And the search pattern is shields that are named starboard. So that is what we need to rename the shields actually. And if you just hover over these values, you can see set drive factor to 10 if the enemy is within negative 179 to -1. And that's basically how you need to set this up. We have the bearing of the enemy. The min value for this one is -1 to -179. Just like that. Now you can see. Sorry, I mixed them up. It is like that to -1. Just like this. Now these are equal. Except this is inverted. So you need to make sure this is not inverted like this. So again, -179 to -1. And of course, negative and positive like angles like this, I always mix them up. So I set this up by just trial and error. And since then I used my prefab. Anyways, this one needs to be set up from 1 degree to 179 degrees. So just do that. For bearing. And it can actually be a smart idea. What you actually, the easier way to set this up is actually just doing like this. Go in here. Set the bearing. And again, the first value we had. -179 to -1, just like this. Not inverted, very good. Then we're gonna go here and we're gonna set up shield projectors. And we're gonna set up set drive. Below 1 disables the shield, so we're going to set the drive to, I don't know, maybe we can have power shields on the value 5. We can increase this later if we want to. And now we can basically take this and copy it, so it will be easier to set up the other ones. But we can copy it to this side. And the cool thing is that this is basically this one, but inverted. So the only thing you need to go here, and as you copy this and just paste this here, you go to the condition, you click the inverted box, you go to this, then you go to shield drive and set the drive to 0. Now you can see we disabled all of the shields. And this is because they are now controlling all shields. They should only control the starboard shields. So we have the condition, but on the target in action, we need to set this thing. Name, search pattern. We should name this to port. So we paste in port here. We paste in port there. Now you can see they are searching for 0 blocks. So what we basically do is we find all of the shield projectors on port side. That is left side for you uneducated. we paste in port here, and by Shift N, so Shift N as in new subscriber, perhaps. And you just paste that in. It is case sensitive, which can be good to know. Just like that. Shift N, paste. And on the front one here, Shift N, paste. Beautiful. Now they are controlled. And as you may imagine, we did set up the port side like this. Here we basically have the same thing, but it's from 1 degree to 179 degrees instead. So just like we set up the other ones, we have enemy bearing, then we have minimum value 1 degree, maximum value 179 degrees. I just have 1 degrees diff there just so that it definitely doesn't trigger wrong, because I had some issues with that when I set them up first. And then we go to target and action, and we have the shield projectors, set the drive to 0. And this is when the condition is inverted. And when the condition is not inverted, same 1 degree to 179 degrees, not inverted, we set the drive factor to 5, just like that. And again, the key. They are named starboard. So copy whatever you wrote into the search pattern. Starboard is a little bit helpful because this is starboard. And then you just paste that in on all of the shield projectors on the starboard side. And they will thus be controlled. Just like this. And just like that. So starboard and port are now automatically controlled using our automated control blocks, so that we only use the engine power on the side that actually is currently taking damage. Very smart. It can now be a very smart idea to prefab and save this, so you don't ever have to set this up again, because it's annoying. This is EMP susceptible, by the way, so stick it inside your AI or a insulated compartment. We don't really know exactly where we're going to have our AI compartment, so they will just sit around here. Currently, we did set the shield drive factor to 5. It's good to have it as high as possible, because the higher the drive factor, the higher the deflection rate. But, you know, we'll see how much engine power we have when the ship is done, and we can just change the shield drive factor to higher if we have the engine capacity to do so. And that's basically automated shield side switching set up, so we can check this off the list. We are, however, not done with the ACBs. We need some more ACBs, so we are going to add 2 ACBs here. And basically, we are now going to go to the next little part, which is powered decoys. We're going to add the decoys later, but first off, we are going to find them here on the list. First, we need a condition. And the condition is basically going to be, is there an enemy? Is there an enemy between 0 and 5,000 meters? Like, does an enemy exist? If an enemy exists, we will turn on the powered decoys. And here you can see, here are the powered decoys. That is heat, radar, and sonar, all in one. So we can control all of them with one little block. So if this happens, we will set consumption to maximum, or whatever we can afford. This is basically engine power per, engine power continuously. So each decoy with a max value use 1000 engine power. We may not be able to afford that much engine power on this ship, so we're gonna set this to 350, making them somewhat strong. We'll see if they are strong enough or not. And the other block is going to do like this. So we're just gonna Control C, Control V. So we copy this, but we are going to click the inverted. So basically, if there is not an enemy, if there is no enemy, set the consumption to 0 so we don't use any power at standby. That's the basic setup. Now we go to the defense, and here we have the heat decoy, the radar decoy, and the sonar decoy. The heat decoy will provide a hot block that the enemy can basically focus and target on, and we will basically provide a fake hot aim point. So we should wisely place this at an area of our ship where it doesn't really matter if an enemy targets and shoots their weapons. So you can do different ways. You can hide it in areas of the ship where it's pretty far away from anything important. These are EMP susceptible, by the way, which is good to know, but we could hide it I don't know, maybe inside here, so it will target something back here instead of shooting at something important. But of course, we don't want this to be hurt, so I usually like to do this. I usually like to have a spin block, and on this spin block, I build a little structure, and on this little structure, we can add a area where we can put them on. So now I'm actually gonna do like this, so it looks symmetrical at least. Now we're just gonna set this to continuous and set this to a very reasonable rotation, so it kind of looks like a sort of radar, whatever. We can deco this and make it look nice. I have my own prefabbed ones, and I have a heat seeker here, or heat decoy there, and a radar decoy here, and basically radar guided stuff will target this, so radar guided missiles will target this thing, and since it's moving around, they will a lot of the time try and aim, and then will just miss and bypass the ship altogether. Same with the heat decoy. This will also make heat-seeking missiles basically aim this moving point. Funny thing also is that lasers may be set up to target hot blocks, because that's how people usually set up lasers. And then they will basically try and aim at this point and, you know, miss. Can be a cool idea to smoke this as well, so that it's smoke protected. You can armor this up, by the way. You don't need to leave them bare like this. If you want them to survive a little bit longer, it can be a good idea to even use heavy armor on them, like this, if you want to. That is completely optional. You can make a spinny thing below the water as well, if you want to. What can just suffice is, what I usually do at least, is I just take truss blocks, because they are nice like that. And just add a little thing that sticks down like this. Like that. Well, we can make it a little bit more streamlined, so to say. And then we just add a sonar decoy. So, if we have torpedoes that are going to try and hit the side of our hull, they're gonna divert and shoot at this thing. And a lot of the time, they will actually miss, but if they don't miss, they will at least not cause an explosion that will hurt the hull, which is nice. And again, you can put this on a thing that spins, and it will be very hard for sonar-seeking torpedoes to hit you. So that is the simplest way to set up power decoys and control them with ACBs, so that they don't use power when you don't need them. Now, just to show you here, if we just let's set the consumption to 200, you can just see the values on them. You can see how hot this is, and you can compare that to the hotness of your other blocks. And if this is the hottest block, the enemy heat seeker would most likely go for this. And here you can see the chance of this diverting a enemy missile You can see if it comes from the left or right, it's only 17%, so using 200 power is a little bit low if we want to divert all of the enemy missiles. We can just play around with this to find a value that's reasonable. Let's say this is set to 400. Then the radar decoy will divert 33% of missiles. So if you want this radar decoy to basically take all of the radar guided missiles and throw them into not your ship, well, then you probably need to have a maxed out decoy. But that is if you have the engine power to use this. Now, this is going to be set to 0, of course, since there is no enemy right now. Before I forget it, a good thing is to go to the power section on the V menu, V as in victory. You can basically set the priority of stuff here. It's usually a good idea to make sure that your decoys, like your sonar decoy, heat decoy, radar decoy, has the lowest possible priority. So if you have engine power problem, the decoys are the ones that are going to get the power the last, so that you don't power like decoys when you can't even afford keeping your shields alive, for example, or the laser lamps. And there we have the powered decoys. We can thus check them off the list, and we should take a little look at missile decoys. I'm sure you have seen ships like the Megalodon and stuff use missile decoys to trick your missiles and stuff like that. You can also, it also uses torpedo decoys actually, and that's something you can set up as well. I'm just going to show you how to set up an easy little decoy, and we're going to use that is a missile decoy. So we're going to have a large launcher here, and we are going to, like this, thank you, and some large gantries, a little controller like this as well. We also want to have a winch connected up to it. And you have to choose how many modules you will want on this. I think that this will be a little bit too little, so I will have 4 modules. I think 4 modules may be enough, hopefully. Right, so we're going to have a variable thruster. We are going to have a radar target simulator, which is already here. We're going to have a sticky flare. And if you were to use, if you were to set up sonar torpedo decoys, you would use a sonar target simulator, and of course you would make it in the water as well. We're going to set this up to not be in the water. We want the sticky flare, and we need a harpoon. So cable length can be 600 like this. Actually, I think we should set it to maybe like 200 is a little bit more reasonable. The sticky flare should have a start delay of like 1 second, so we don't start it just right off like that. Post ignite drop 20 seconds should be enough. Radar target also take that to 1 like this, and then we have a variable thruster, and we're gonna have this at pretty low. Oh yeah, we actually need another module, unfortunately, because we need to have a bit of fuel. So here we can add some fuel. It can be on top, that's okay. And then we go to the variable thruster and we set the thrust output so that it can basically power us for as long as this decoy is alive, which is almost 40 seconds. Yeah, 35 seconds thrust will be absolutely fine. And then you will go... of course, if you want to have some fancy effect or stuff like that, we can... I should remove flame visibility. We can have a smoke trail. Well, whatever. Doesn't matter. Then we go to the winch here. And we click Q on it. Power used by the winch, set this to 0. Desired range, 200. Release after 100 seconds is fine. And uncheck break cable at max length. And if you have more of these, you can click it to apply to all. Again, we can set up a local weapon controller and just make this passively always fire. That works absolutely fantastic as well. We can also do like this. We can use an automated control block. And here under enemy, we have missiles / torpedoes. So when there is a missile or torpedo or missile, we're going to set it to only missiles. If there is a missile between 0 and, yeah, I don't know, 300 meters, 3,000 meters, I mean, is probably fine. We can trigger this and we can thus set it to fire weapons. So here under weapons and defenses, click weapon systems and check fire. And now we should rename this to decoy, right, like that. And now we go to the missile controller and we write in decoy here. Now you can see when you go in here, it will thus fire this. So if there is a weapon detected or a missile detected, this will fire this decoy, and it will basically sit here in the water and or not in the water, in the air, yeah, and just chill around there, and it will drag enemy missiles towards it and basically trick them at not hitting our ship. Very handy. So that is missile decoys for you. We can check that off the list. Next out we have ECM and chaff. So go to defenses. Here we have the chaff emitter. And here we have the ECM signal jammer. And the signal jammer disturbs wireless connections. So since most people use wireless connections for their detection, it will basically make your enemy's detection a bit worse. It will also disturb remote guided missiles and sensors. Like you can make sensor buoys with like missiles and torpedoes. That's pretty useless, but you can. The ECM jammer will disturb that. It will also disturb the connections between vehicles. So when we use the inter-vehicle transmitter, we kind of can disturb the inter-vehicle transmitters a little bit with the ECM jammer. The ECM jammer is super handy. You can see here, if we're using 1000 power, we can have a maximum missile error at point blank of 6 meters, which isn't really enough. So let's say it uses 6000 power, then we can kind of make things not hit us very much effectively. And you can see we have a effect strength of jamming of 55% at 500 meters, for example. So using a sensor scrambler or signal jammer ECM is pretty expensive power-wise. You only need one of them, by the way, but they're pretty strong. They're pretty strong. You can, of course, use several, but I mean, it's enough with one. It goes up to 20,000 power. Now, you don't want this to be on all the time. Same with this. This is a chaff emitter. And the chaff emitter, as you understand, if you know what a chaff emitter is, it basically shits out a lot of weird metal confetti stripe things that makes missile radar seekers and enemy active radars basically less able to precisely pin down where we are. If you use chaff emitters, however, on something very, very stealthy, you may accidentally provide a big radar cloud, so that leads it to you being detected, which is not very good. But anyways, the easiest way to control these guys is actually with a breadboard. So we're going to go to our AI, and we're going to add an AI breadboard. And then we are basically just going to have a primary target info. So here, if there is a target, basically, we're going to do like this. It's going to be very simple. If there is a target, multiply by a value, basically. Or that's actually not very handy. We're going to use the math evaluator instead. So here we have a math evaluator. And we're going to take that. If there is a target, the first one, is there a target? Then output 1. If there is not, output 0. So we're going to write in here, if parenthesis A. So if there is a target, output, well, how strong do we want them? Let's make the signal jammer like use 500. And if not, output 0. Like that. And then we need to find a generic block setter. Right there. So here we have a generic block setter. Then we are going to go here and scroll down until we find the signal jammer, ECM. And basically connect this up here. So if there is an enemy, we will use 500 power to turn on the sensor scrambler. We can add another generic block setter. We can find our chaff emitter somewhere. And there it is. And here we have material use. So we can just copy this and set this to a lower value. So for example, 10. If there is an enemy, use 10 materials per second for our chaff emitter. Otherwise, turn it off. So if we go up here, you should see that the ECM jammer is off and the chaff emitter is also off. The chaff emitter is EMP susceptible, yeah, and so is the signal jammer, so it's best to hide these away inside the AI, or somewhere safe-ish. You may want the chaff to be at the edge of your vehicle, actually. The chaff emitter is kind of a block you kind of want to be shot off in case your vehicle is very damaged. Because if your vehicle is very damaged, you definitely don't want to use a lot of materials for your chaff emitters. Then it's, you know, you want to save those materials for dealing damage. Well, that is the ECM and the chaff emitter. So we can actually cross that off our list. Now we have something very specific, which is evasive maneuvers. And for this, I'm going to spawn this boat, which is the Fylke. And it has a evasion system that uses, it's actually an evasive boat. Using evasive boats is, yeah, it's not usually how you build boats, but you can. So I'm not gonna stop you, I've done so as well. So if we go in here, we have the additional routine, we have projectile avoidance. So inside the additional routines, you can add projectile avoidance. And this basically has 1/distance if 300 minus d, 1, 0, then it will, it seems like this is a bit, yeah, so this is set to E. I don't know, it kind of cuts off. So it's set to E, auxiliary output, basically. So if we have a projectile thing that is closer than 300 meters, we will activate the E axis. And as you can see here, we have set up this as a MISC input. We checked this box, mix axes, and we added E positive. So if something trigger E, it will make the custom jet engines fire full force. So, as you might imagine, if we add a marauder, maybe we need to add a marauder at a closer range. When a marauder is firing at that, so we can reload all here. There it goes. When it fires, it will now jump out of the water. That's how the DIF-CIWS evasion is working. That's the most simple evasion you can set up. It's very basic and it's not very sophisticated, but that's something you can do. So back here at the hoplite hull, here you have it, projectile avoidance, and you can set up a projectile avoidance to trigger if something happens. It's like set up with this pre-setup. So if something has a distance closer than 100 meters, you can like set it to jaw, to strafe, to do whatever you want it to do. Evasiveness is usually not very useful for ships, but it can be in the right circumstances. If you can't add new routines, it means that your AI need a behaviors and additional routine cards. One of these, which this AI has. Now, there is a type of passive evasion you can set up as well. If you go into your ship and you go to your PIDs, you can edit the jaw to be pretty like extreme. We're actually going to set this in the water so we can actually test it out. So here we have the hoplite hull, and just to go in here and making sure that I select this one since they are called the same. I'm just gonna go in there, not the detection, here, and then we're going to go to PIDs and we're gonna have jaw. And we're basically gonna have pretty low derivative time, and we're gonna take gain and just boost it up so it's very, very high. We want to make this, we want to set this thing up to basically be a little bit snappy and annoying when it's controlling jaw from left to right. So we can play around with this, set gain to 1, set integral to 0 and 0, or something that makes sense. Or just switch to basic, or just switch to like, no, that doesn't work, right? Switch to basic, yeah, response width, okay. And now it will just input max value when it needs to turn on each direction. And this will basically make it less smooth when it's controlling itself. So it will be very extreme in its angles, and it will kind of, yeah, wiggle back and forth a little bit. If we just spawn a marauder here, you can see that we are providing a little bit of an unsophisticated jaw motion, which does translate into the ship wiggling a little bit back and forth, and this provides passive evasion. Now, I don't usually like to use this type of passive evasion, but it absolutely works. You can use passive evasion like this. Border-Rise, for example, is really good at adding passive evasion. It's of course more effective on fast ships like hydrofoils and stuff like that. But if you have really fast ships, passive evasing, making your ship wiggle back and forth like this can be an effective strategy at avoiding incoming CRAM shells and stuff like that. Yeah, and that is basically all I have to teach you about this. For completion, we need to check off the list. Evasive maneuvers. Right, this is a pretty long video, but this is all of the evasion strategies you can basically have. So let us spawn some other ships, like the Smoker, for example. Maybe it's removed. We're gonna add the Contraband, and we can show our little setup here. Well, that is basically how to set all of the different systems and weapons for active controls. You can see we have a little bit too little engine power to actually run our shields at desired strength, but, well, it works. The CRAM system is now targeting the enemies instead because we are not being shot at, which is, I mean, good, but not good for showcasing anything really. Well, taking them out of play instead. Now you can see we got a detected ballistic missile, so our decoy is now launched in the air. And our CIWS cannon is thus trying to shoot at it. As you can see, it's doing that quite reliably. And there our interceptors got up in the air and destroyed it. Isn't that quite nice? And in case we may need to spawn in some other things to overwhelm our CRAM defenses, we can see that when we are getting things that are too close, the lambs will take care of them, as you can see there. So everything seems to be working as intended. Very nice. Very long tutorial, but of course we went through basically, I don't know, 10 tutorials in one is basically what we did here. So you requested it, the different type of CRAM weapons, closing weapon system, active defenses of all different kinds. Well, this is all I could come up with, so here they are. Naturally, offense is the best defense, so I would recommend doing that instead or as well. You can ask in the comments if you want some specific tutorials to be included later on, or if you want this little tutorial series to continue, then you can tell me what you want of this ship, or the next stages. In any case, I just want to say big thanks to all of the commissioned officers in the army of GMODISM. Commodore, the all-around gamer. Commanders Ali, Ben Wilkie, Cameron Dixon, Sven van der Velde, and our lieutenants Anto, Gravy, Daniel Saikin, J.D. Visage, Josef Ishowski, Owen, Vincent Vertas, Volkite, and Scooby Rocks. Your monthly support helps me a lot to keep all these projects going. So in any case, big thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. In case you did, please do subscribe to this channel. And if you want to, you can subscribe to the GMODIST and the Relaxism channel as well in the upper right corner. The Relaxism channel especially needs to reach 1000 subscribers. So if you want to help me in a free way, that's appreciated. In any case, this is your host Eric, and I am signing out.